Hi, my name is Daniel, and I'm here to present to you a draft policy that my small group in the Housing Policy Leadership Academy from the Southern California Association of Governments has put together to promote the production of affordable housing on church land. We started out our process by talking about a classic analysis of a problem by stating a value, then the problem, then a solution, and then actions. And so a series of the next slides are going to focus on one of those letters. We started with what Fullerton's values are, and there's a couple that are there, but one that really appealed to us was keep communities thriving. And that refers to lots of different communities, residents as well as retail, as well as congregational life in the city of Fullerton. So backed with the strength of that as the supporting foundation of what we wanted to do, we move forward to look at the issue. There are many things that make housing expensive, not the least of which is a shortage of supply and a host of environmental regulation and opposing neighbor issues that keep the amount of housing from being built that we need to be built to even keep up with demand, much less continue to get more behind, which is what's happening today. This slide is very telling about what a housing shortage does for people who are not of the highest income levels. This graph shows the red line is 30% of income. If you pay more than that for rent, you are considered housing burdened. And you can see the blue bar is in the city of Fullerton. According to the American Community Survey, nearly 60% of apartment residents are paying nearly 60% of their income in rent, which if you don't have to do much math to figure that out, it doesn't leave you lots of money left over for food or clothing or any kind of entertainment or anything like that. You may be familiar with the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, also a function of SCAG indirectly. And in the fifth cycle, which was approximately 8 years ago, the number of homes that was projected that Fullerton would need was about 1,800. In the current cycle, the number is 13,000. That is a massive increase in the number of homes that have been identified as necessary to help moderate the difficulties that come from the housing shortage, including the housing being too expensive for many, many people. What is the result of this? You all know, and you've heard it, is people find it too expensive to live in California. So people are still leaving the state in order to find a better quality of life because they don't have to spend so much of their income in rent. And so they're moving to places like Phoenix, from where I'm speaking to you today, and also Salt Lake City and Boise, Idaho, and Austin and Nashville. What we're concerned about is if this problem continues for any length of time, it creates a perpetual underclass because I'm spending that much of my income on housing. It's virtually impossible to put away savings, to build a foundation, to move forward, to actually grow in terms of the quality of one's own life. And it will continue to get worse if we don't do something. So we took a look at things and we did some research to equip ourselves with what might be necessary to write this draft policy in the production of affordable housing on congregational lands. And we had some wonderful bits of people that we could reach out to, including other developers of projects like this. We went to webinars put on by church organizations who had already done this sort of work. And we consulted with a variety of people who had useful input and direction in terms of how to craft this policy. This chart will tell you of the properties that have been identified in the city of Fullerton's updated housing element of potential candidates to receive new affordable housing construction. I've circled the number down at the bottom. It is over 4,000 potential units that the city itself has identified that might be done on church properties. And here are all their names and addresses. It's quite a long list. And here they are mapped out. Every one of those purplish colored dots is one of the properties you saw on the previous slide. And they are spread pretty far and wide over the city of Fullerton. Among our studies and among things that providers of housing and city fathers and others would consider, what is the best place? Which of these church properties might provide the best candidate for new housing. What we map, this is just one of many factors, but what this one maps is ambient air pollution levels. And the green is better. You can see the scale on the right that indicates where pollution is. This is just one consideration of a host that comes into place when we're trying to decide which properties to prefer for the production of this affordable housing. This type of land, the underutilized land, which is generally vacant most of the week and then has a bit of a crowd on the weekends, is a total missed opportunity. Or as I like to think about it, as I work in the development industry, I see a property like that and just say, oh, we could put houses there. And that's exactly what the city saw. And that's the policy we're trying to promote. There's a lot of it, and it presents itself as either paved surfaces and sometimes just as green field surfaces that are ready to have things done on them. So in thinking about this and how to present it and the content that we wanted to have in the process for rolling it out, we came up with a SMART goal that we also consider to be our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal, which is to prepare the city of Fullerton to heartily accept, implement, and deploy a congregational overlay zone policy by 2024. That's pretty much right around the corner, but we're very excited about that as a possibility, and that is what we are aiming for. So what is overlay zoning? All property has a fundamental underlying zone. Here, some are identified there. It might be residential or office or retail. An overlay zone is like putting another overcoat over the shirt you're already wearing that changes the appearance of things. And so the overlay zone provides another pathway to do a different use that might not be allowed in the underlying zone. In our particular case, in a commercial zone, often residential housing is not allowed. The overlay zoning would make that possible on that site without a fundamental underlying zone change, which requires lots of agency interaction. What is the advantage of overlay zones? It's that they allow by right development. It's difficult to overemphasize how important this aspect is. Developers seek certainty in proposing projects, and they want to know that their path to approval is one that can actually be accomplished without a great deal of trouble and money involved to get to where they need to get to. So in order to do that, there are certain regulations that need updating, and there's a few of them that we identified. Zoning is the one we're going after by proposing an overlay zone. So that together with environmental review processes and perhaps the agency approval process would all simplify the production of housing. There are a lot of parties who might have a voice at the table when it comes to deciding what this policy is going to do, where the houses should go, and who are the best people to deliver them. This is a collection of some of those stakeholders that we identified who could possibly be even remotely involved with the production of housing, even within the scope of our congregational overlay zone. We were also asked to consider the costs of what we're proposing, and would love to say there's no cost, but there will be costs. So we've estimated some of them. There's a possible impact on infrastructure because we would propose to develop housing where there wasn't before. And so water, sewer, the types of services that are provided by the city, there could be a cost on that. Also city staff time to write the proposal, to review it, and to get it implemented. And then as a stretch, if the policy leads to the city needing to provide additional funding for affordable housing, that is another potential expense to the city as well. Now I'd like to just roll right into our policy and its key points, introducing the Congregational Overlay Zone. Love this image of an historic town that shows that housing next to churches is hardly a new idea. It's been done for centuries, and sometimes the old ideas are worth trying again. What a congregational overlay zone does is help to provide land available to affordable housing developers outside of the fiercely competitive environment that exists in most pursuits of new property on which to do housing. It makes it a lot easier for them to be engaged in these properties and do what they do. So I'd like to just examine a few of the key policy points of what we're proposing. And the red letters here should help you to understand what our emphasis is. Production, I said that before, of housing. That's one of 5 Ps of how to preserve and promote housing. But we want to do it by right policies. By right policies, again, they provide certainty for developers and they shorten the approval process. We make the land available to affordable developers, as I just explained. But here's a new idea I want to introduce, is that there are potential benefits to these mature church properties in doing this sort of arrangement with an affordable housing developer. We have some ambitious goals for the implementation of our policy. We go through the steps that are outlined in the bullet points there, and you can see the timeline on the bottom shows as we begin to talk to outreach partners, people who have a stake in this, and it progresses through different groups of outreach, feedback, amendment of what we're proposing in order to get to Planning Commission in about a year and City Council in the first quarter of 2024. Part of our task, and whoever is involved in promoting this policy, is coalition building. And I won't read these, but you can see it's the churches, very importantly, the developers, the neighborhoods surrounding the churches, and of course, the city leaders. That's in shorthand. Those are the key persons who will be involved in building the coalition to get this done. Churches are important because historically, they are a part of the community in which they exist. And they have a symbiotic relationship with that community. They want to be involved in it. They want to be a presence. And some churches have taken on the slogan, love your neighbors and house them. And that is a faith-based support of this policy that comes from those who have the property to do it. So the local churches will actually have to be persuaded, and this can be done by outreach and presenting the benefits to them, as well as the opportunity for what it might mean for their neighborhoods and even their congregants. The single most important one is probably that it will generate additional revenue for the church. Many of these properties are mature congregations that don't have the resources that they had at one point in time, but they do have the richness of a great deal of land. And if they enter into a deal with the developer, there's often a new revenue stream, either in a partial payment for the land itself and or residual benefits from the rental property. And they can be part of the solution. That is a great motivator for churches to not just be present in the community, but to be engaged with the community. We also outreach to the city, the stakeholders at the city, those who write policies, enforce policies, and encourage developers and others to abide by the policies and embrace and engage them. There will be outreach that we get to do with them as well. Presentations like this can be part of that in order that we educate the city staff and develop an appetite for what we're describing in our policy. The stakeholders I mentioned give us feedback, and even getting to this point in our policy, we've had some very important feedback from some stakeholders, and they're listed below. One of the things I want to point out is it takes staff, city staff, plus developers, plus design professionals, all kind of working together in order to embrace solutions that make the most out of these properties while still respecting the neighborhood and being sensitive to neighbors. And to wrap up, we took one of the properties off the list and we just did a very quick study of the possibility of adding housing to St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Fullerton. You can see it has some existing buildings, they're relatively low key, and a fairly large amount of surface parking. And it's the surface parking that is our most obvious target for the placement of new housing. So as I said, we did a quick study for this site. And here you can see the parking has been rearranged a little bit, and we've added 3 apartment buildings, each of which is 10 units, to provide 30 dwelling units on this property and create a small community that would be expected to have a symbiotic relationship between the residents and the congregation. And perhaps even some members of the congregation would occupy these residences. And this is a hypothetical view of the massing of the apartments, that tries to use an architecture that is consistent with the neighborhood and with the church property itself, even though it's a little bit bigger. This is the view from Chapman and Victoria. This is a view from the channel side, the pathway side of, pathway side of the property that shows the relationship of the new buildings and the existing buildings. The community gardens that were formerly located at the corner of Chapman and Victoria will move to this large triangle space down in the bottom that you see pointing at you from this slide. This is only 30 of the 4,000 possible units that the city has suggested as possible. And so we wanted to say, let's see what one might actually begin to flesh out like. So we want to encourage all of our friends and stakeholders to take bold action to serve this problem. We stated our goal earlier. We want to engage the churches, we want to engage the city. And we really believe that the passage of this ordinance in the city of Fullerton and in other places will have a very beneficial effect, not just to the overall housing supply in California, but onto the community in which it's placed. So thank you very much for listening.